You're listening to God, Law, and Liberty with David Fowler and Gary Humble. We're putting culture on a collision course with the truth.
Welcome to another episode of God, Law, and Liberty. I'm Gary.
And I'm David.
And we've got some really intricate things to discuss today.
Yeah, inside baseball.
Inside baseball, yeah. How, or some might say, how the sausage is made.
Yeah, that's right.
I think a lot of people, including myself, especially before coming to work for FACT, don't really understand how the legislative process works. In other words, how does a bill get from being thought about to being written to being passed to being signed into law? And also, I think sometimes people get confused. I know I do when you, for example, when you look at an issue like abortion, and you look at a state like Tennessee, who, we're right smack dab in the middle of the Bible Belt.
Yeah, we're the buckle, so to speak.
Right.
They say. Yeah.
Right. We've got a fairly conservative majority in both our House and our Senate and in our General Assembly, and so you would think that a bill like this would just fly through the legislature.
Abortion
with no problem.
stuff, yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
And then you've got a pro-life governor, and of course you expect something like that to hit his desk and him to put his signature on it, and there we go.
There, right.
But of course, last year we had a fetal heartbeat bill, SB 1236, which was passed in the House, failed in the Senate.
Right.
We had a summer study, and now we've rewritten that bill, and we're now in the last half of our legislative year,
or 2-year cycle.
Yeah, 2-year cycle.
2-year cycle. Yeah.
And here we are again, trying to get the abortion issue solved in Tennessee,
Right.
and so obviously there are some levels of complexity within that we need to discuss and know about. So,
I hope this will be insightful, because, as you say, a lot of times you think, well, this is simple. And of course, right now we're waiting to see what the governor's going to act. Well, we know what he's sort of proposing. We've not seen the language of it. We don't know how it would be written. And one of the things that's often said on the Hill is the devil is in the details. Right. And that's especially true, because depending on how something is worded, it may completely change the...
Yeah, we're really not interested in the Nancy Pelosi model. Don't worry about what's in the bill. Just
right,
pass
yeah.
it. Read it
let's
later.
Just pass something and then we'll read it. No, you need to read it ahead of time, because on a topic like this, there really, in some ways, aren't second chances. We pass a bill that has to do with, where you file a UCC-1 filing to secure the lien on your John Deere tractor or something. Well, we didn't get it right. We'll fix it next year. But when you pass something on abortion or marriage, you're going straight to the courthouse, and there's no opportunity to fix it in that sense. And so you better get it right the first time. And a lot of people didn't understand why the House bill last year, the heartbeat bill, the fetal heartbeat, wasn't good. Why I wasn't supportive of it. And the governor's now come out with another proposal. And while we have drafted at the request of the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing at the end of August, for those who don't know or are tuning into a late or just moved to Tennessee or listening from outside of Tennessee, when the fetal heartbeat bill failed in the Senate, having already passed the House, the Senate had a study committee that met this past summer in August of 2019. We heard 2 days worth of testimonies. We heard from doctors and predominantly lawyers, but to talk about the bill and what was needed to pass a good bill that might actually go into law and the court might uphold. There's no point in passing a law the court won't uphold, I guess. And so we had 2 days worth of hearings. At the end of those hearings, I was asked to draft a stronger version of the proposal we had submitted, which was different from the House version. Our proposal essentially said that once a human life is detected through hormones or a fetal heartbeat, then abortion is prohibited. So That's what our bill said. So I strengthened the bill. We filed it. Then the governor came out with sort of bullet points of things he wanted to do. And we're grateful that we have a pro-life governor who's willing to weigh into this subject.
Absolutely. Let that be said up front.
Sure,
I mean,
sure. So now the question is, but what would we make of his proposal? How will we evaluate it? Just because a person's pro-life doesn't mean that they've gone about making the sausage the best way.
Right.
That's the point.
And so one of the things we know about the bill that will be proposed is we've heard that it's going to sort of be structured off of this Missouri bill that you're going to have. It's sort of a tiered approach.
Yeah, right.
And so we'll talk about that, and also, you mentioned the idea, which will be interesting to discuss, about having findings.
Yes, that's right.
But behind your bill, which really provides sort of the why.
That's right.
To which you've proposed,
yeah,
which is necessary when you get in front of the court.
It is, and that's one of the mistakes that was made in the House last year. The House passed their bill, but they had no legislative findings. They never had any.
What does that mean? They didn't have findings?
Explain that. If you've ever seen a resolution of any kind where it says whereas this and whereas that and whereas now be it resolved that we commend mom and dad for being married 50 years, or the pastor for having served our church 50 years. It's just like it reads sort of like a resolution would read, that we find this and we find this and we find this. And now, based upon what all we found, we're going to pass this law. So you've spelled out for the court what it is that you found so that the court knows what it is you're trying to do. Now, the House had no findings last year. They received no medical testimony. They just passed a bill. That was one of my objections. There's actually a quote that I gave you, and I even mentioned it in my testimony in August. The Supreme Court upheld a partial birth abortion statute several years ago in a case called Gonzalez. And Congress, when they passed that bill, had a couple of pages of findings about partial birth abortion, the way it was conducted, the developmental stage of the child, the medical reasons or lack thereof of the need to have partial birth abortion. So they went through all those findings, and the Supreme Court upheld the federal ban on partial birth abortion. Then in 2016, there was a case we've talked about here, Hellerstedt, Whole Women's Health versus Hellerstedt. It was in 2016. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago because the Fifth Circuit,
because of the Louisiana
situation. It's like the Texas bill, but in that Texas bill, they had a physician admitting privilege, I think it was, and maybe a clinic regulation, and the hope was, because of the Gonzalez case, the Supreme Court was now ready to reverse Roe, and they would uphold the Texas law. Well, the Supreme Court struck it down. But one of the things that they said in that case is critical to understanding why just passing a bill with good language in it may not be enough. So why don't you share with our listeners that quote down there?
Well, it said, unlike Gonzalez, the relevant statute here does not set forth any legislative findings.
Right.
Rather, one is left to infer that the legislature sought to further a constitutionally acceptable objective.
Yeah. So what are they saying? Well, you didn't make any findings.
The first thing is you didn't give us anything to look at.
Yeah. So now we're left to infer that you were doing something appropriate. Well, when you're going in front of a group of people that don't like your worldview and your position, don't let them infer what they want to infer.
Yeah.
Spell it out.
Give them the basis for it.
Give them the basis for it. And they didn't do it. So one of the problems with the heartbeat bill last year in the House was they had no findings. They were going to leave the federal courts to infer what they wanted to infer.
So the issue there is, so you pass a heartbeat bill, well, you conclusively know that that's going to court.
Yeah, right.
And so right away you realize, well, now I'm in front of a court with my pants down, so to speak.
Yeah,
I've got no reason.
I've not spelled out my reason in the bill. That's
yeah.
right. Now, you could try to go back and listen to the legislative tapes and all that. But, hearing Representative X say something and Representative Y say something is not the same as the body as a whole voting to say, this is what we found.
Right.
So just having somebody say something on the record while they're debating the bill isn't the finding of the legislature. That's the statement of that one particular person. That does not make clear the legislative intent.
But when it's written into the bill,
that's right. But now you can't write things into the bill without the evidence for the things in the bill. Okay?
Right.
I mean, if you passed a bill that says we need to do this because if we don't pass this abortion bill, the moon is going to turn blue into cheese and the tidal waves will wash away the world, they might say, you made that finding, but did you bring in any climatologist or anybody to prove that the moon's going to turn into cheese and it'll cause tidal waves? So you need to bring in the evidence, okay? That was lacking in the House last year. Now, it's not lacking in the Senate with respect to the Rule of Law Life Act that we passed, because we brought in Dr. Brent Bowles, and he testified to all the medical stuff that is in that bill.
Right.
We brought in other lawyers who testified to the legal stuff that's in the Rule of Law Life Act. So when you read the Rule of Law Life Act as a pro-life person, you'll read probably 15 or 18 pages of whereas clauses. And you want to get frustrated and say, oh, come on, Fowler, just tell me when is abortion allowed or not allowed? But see, those were written for the court. They weren't written for Joe Citizen. They're saying, I know we're going to go to court, and I don't want to leave the court like it was in Hellerstedt, left to infer anything. Mm-hmm. They're either going to understand what I said or they're either going to agree with what I said or they're going to disagree, but they're not going to misunderstand what I've said.
Yeah, already in the bill that they're reading, you've been able to make your case.
That's right.
Without even showing up for a day in court.
That's right. I've already sort of set forth the skeletal part of the argument, and I've backed it up with evidence, because you will see as you read through the Rule of Law Life Act, the Senate heard testimony that. The Senate heard testimony that. Okay? I note that the testimony was recorded so that even members of the House could hear that testimony, to sort of extrapolate the notion that this wasn't just 9 people in the Senate Judiciary Committee that heard the testimony. The whole legislature, the whole public could hear all this testimony.
Yeah, that's a bit. As we're talking through this, I'm just realizing the gravity and the importance of this. On an issue like abortion, again, we know without a shadow of a doubt that no matter what is passed, it is going to court.
Yes,
it will get challenged.
Sure.
So if the legislature is passing a bill with like you say, without the appropriate findings, knowing that you are going to court, that's just irresponsible.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's what you might call legislative malpractice. It'd be like a lawyer going to court without bringing his witnesses.
Right.
You just wouldn't do it. In fact, one of the doctors in the legislature was asking me about legislative findings and a legislative record, and what does that mean? And I said to the doctor, when you see a patient, do you take notes of your visit? That I suggested he have an X-ray of his chest. It sounded like he had cold or pneumonia or fluid in his lungs, and he declined to take the X-ray. Well, yeah, sure, you do that. And I said, so if you didn't keep those notes and the guy dies of pneumonia and his widow sues you and says, why didn't you tell my husband he should have had an X-ray or a CAT scan or something? You want to have those records to say, oh, I asked him and I told him, and here's where he denied wanting to have it. Said, if you don't have that record, then you're just in a spitting contest. Well,
which with the Supreme Court, you're going to lose.
You don't want to be in a spitting contest. You don't want them inferring.
Right.
That's right. And I went, that's what I'm saying. I said, if you called me and said, oh, I'm being sued because this guy died of pneumonia, but I told him, you need to have a chest X-ray, and he refused. I said, did you put that in your medical records? No, I don't keep medical records. I just kind of remember things. I would tell you to call your insurance carrier and pay out whatever the claim is, because I have nothing to prove that you actually did what you were supposed to do. So people need to understand that. And they don't understand that. They think it's just pass the bill and we see what the court says. So now I'm going to say something else here that really frustrates me. One of the things about a part-time legislature is that they don't want to be there all year. And our legislature comes in on Monday nights. They leave on Thursdays, usually before noon, until the last weeks of session. You have a committee meeting that some of the longer committees might meet for 2 hours. Well, when you have something like abortion or marriage, thinking of our Common Law Marriage Act, you're not going to bring in sufficient testimony from all the sides that need to be heard and get it done in 2 hours.
Right. Yeah.
So the process is set up to not dealing with significant, weighty issues, because we got to hurry.
Right.
We got to get done.
And you can't hurry through.
You can't hurry through this. I got an election. I got to leave here in April. I mean, I know that, whatever we're doing on marriage or abortion is bad, but, I don't have time to fix it. I got to get out of here. I got to run for re-election in the August primary. So when are you going to bring in?
And I got a business I got to run.
Yeah, I got a business. I mean, I get the whole situation, but the point is, when do you have time to hear from 2 or 3 doctors and 4, 5, 6 knowledgeable lawyers? At any length of time, you can't say you have 5 minutes or 10 minutes, which is generally what we would do at best, to explain the complicated legal issues surrounding abortion or same-sex marriage. It's just not possible. So we set ourselves up for dealing with insignificant things, by and large, small little things that you can handle in short periods of time, may not require a lot of experts, and or things that the leadership has kind of already agreed, and this is what we're going to put our focus on. And I'm sorry you came up with something important, but we don't have time for your important thing because we got to get through the governor's agenda or the speaker's agenda. So the whole system is set up against dealing with significant, weighty, fundamental issues. And so we don't even put the sausage in the machine most of the time.
Wow.
So, for example, here we are at the end of February, and the House has already given notice that I think it's by the end of next week. If you have not put your bill on notice, if you've not said, I'm ready to be heard by the end of the first week of March, you're out for this session. They're just not going to hear your bill. Well, we didn't come back till the second week of January. Yeah,
that's some quick turnaround.
That's right. And then you got to go in the House from that subcommittee where you got to get started to a full committee, to a calendar committee, to the floor, and then you have to start over in the Senate. I mean, how do you do something significant and weighty and fundamental? You just kind of don't. We
should think through that, and that's a podcast for another day in itself. That is a problem.
Yeah,
it's an issue.
Yeah, and people don't understand how that works. But anyway, we wanted to talk also about the Missouri bill.
So we've established clearly that we need to put this basis, we need these findings, we need this evidence, in our bill. So
and if we don't have it, we're not really serious.
And so the Missouri bill has that.
That's right.
But has some problems.
Yeah, it has some problems.
Let's talk about that.
And that's very important. One of the things that this is probably 3 podcasts, that we could do on this. But one of the things that's very clear is that courts do not overturn long-held precedent for light and transitory reasons. I think those words are actually in the Declaration of Independence. People will live with a mess as long as they can. You don't change your government for light and transitory reasons, and you don't change precedent when all of culture has now been adapted and fitted based upon that precedent. We've talked about that before. People have defined their view of themselves and their place in society in reliance on abortion.
That was part of the Casey decision.
Yeah. So consequently, you don't overturn that lightly. You tear the fabric of the social order. So you have to give them something substantial, something principled to say, why should I go from vanilla ice cream to chocolate ice cream? Okay. Now, what Missouri is trying to do in their bill is they're saying, well, we're really principled. You should not have an abortion after 8 weeks, because by then we know that there is or is not going to be a fetal heartbeat, and by golly, you should not have an abortion after that. But Supreme Court, if you don't like that idea, we could be really principled at 14 weeks. Mm-hmm. But if you don't like that, we could be really, really principled at 18 weeks too. Mm-hmm. Now, if you don't like 18 weeks, we could be really principled about saying you shouldn't have an abortion at 20 weeks when the baby can feel pain. Yeah. So
at 20 weeks, well, I'm really principled. That's something I can really stand on.
I can stand on that. But I can stand any of these places. You just let me know.
You just tell me where I need to stand,
and that's
by golly, I'm going to stand.
I'm going to stand there.
I'm going to stand on this principle.
That's right. I mean, when you kind of put it like that, it sounds a little odd, but I mean that's what they're saying. So how do you do that? How do you pass a law that's got 3-4 crimes in it?
I just thought about it. It's like, imagine being in front of the court and you're being accused of murder, and you're in front of the judge, and the judge is asking you, so you guilty or not guilty? Well, I'm not guilty. And I'm really not guilty. But if somehow you guys find that that's just not holding water, well then, I was an accomplice. I was there. But if somehow, but I can really stand on the fact that this is guilty by reasons of insanity. I mean, that's an argument I can really stand. I mean, you see, it's just silly.
Yeah, it does get.
I mean, is it or isn't it?
Yeah, and then part of the issue with these things is that you're going to the court almost pleading with them. What policy can I have? Now, I can't keep somebody from suing and arguing my policy's wrong, but it's almost like going and saying, I've got several different principles here that I could live with. Which one will you let me live with? Or which one will you let babies live with? And so how do you pass a bill that's got multiple crimes? And so as I went to read the bill to see how it worked, the question is, so, okay, do I prosecute the doctor at 8 weeks if he does an abortion at 8 weeks? And if the court strikes that down, then I'll next come back and prosecute a doctor who does an abortion after 14 weeks or later. And then if the court strikes that down, I'll do one at 18 weeks. Those are what are called severability clauses. So you pass a law and you say, this is my law. Now, if the court strikes down all or a part of my law, then keep what's left. Keep what's left. That's severability. You get rid of the bad part, you keep what's left. So when I first thought of the bill, I thought it was saying, we're going to prosecute you if you do an abortion after 8 weeks. If you sue us over that, and the court says, no, that's too early. That's an undue burden prior to viability of the baby. Then, okay, that part's long, but at that point, the 14-week ban springs into action. Okay, it's never been sued over yet. And so we sever the 8-week part. We're left with 14 weeks. You prosecute a doctor for 14 weeks. If that's found unconstitutional, okay, that gets severed out. And what's still left of the bill is 18 weeks. Now we prosecute a doctor for 18 weeks. Well, that's the way I expected the bill to be written, but it wasn't written that way. They're all law all at the same time. So then what do? Do you just go around?
All of these tiers, the way the law is written, they're all in effect simultaneously. That's right. So that's a bit unusual. So I called a law professor friend of mine, and he said, normally, David, you're correct that that's normally how severability clauses work. You make something effective immediately, and then you say, but if that fails, then this other law takes effect. And if that fails, then another law takes effect. You could maybe do that sort of in seriatim. But this one has them all in effect at the same time. So I said, so how does severability work here? And he said, well, just like abortion is its own little area of jurisprudence. We treat it differently from criminal law and tort law and property law. Abortion's its own little thing. He said, so is severability clause. In the Hellerstedt case that we mentioned earlier, the case that came out of Texas or the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court made a very interesting statement, and that case had the severability clause as well. And you often put that in laws that will be constitutionally that's in most
challenged.
Contracts. I
mean,
severability clauses are pretty common.
Yeah, that's right. The rest of the contract would stay.
Yeah.
And so the court said, well, when it comes to abortion here, we're not going to sever. We find this particular provision unconstitutional, so the whole law fails. Well, the purpose of severability is to say, well, don't let the whole law fail. Well, they did that anyway. It's sort of its own little niche for abortion. But here's what the court said. They said that the court would not devise a judicial remedy that entails, and I'm quoting here, a judicial remedy that entails quintessentially legislative work. Now, what are they saying? Your job is to decide what the policy is and the principle is. Don't come up here to me with 4 different laws and expect me to sort out which ones are constitutional and which ones aren't.
We're not doing your job for you.
We're not doing your job for you. You tell me which one you want, and I'll decide it. But if I decide one of your things isn't good, I'm getting rid of all the rest, because I'm not going to sit here and labor through, oh, well, now let's turn to 14, and oh, now let's turn to 18, and oh, now let's turn to the late-term abortion fetal pain bill. No.
So this is in the Hellerstedt decision?
That's in the Hellerstedt decision. So you had 5 justices say, we're not going to read your severability clauses the way you
hoped we would, yeah.
because we're not going to do your legislative work. They said, don't do that. Now, 4 of the justices that are still in the court disagreed with that and said, that's not the way we've ever done anything. For example, you could have an abortion clinic regulation that says the doors all have to be 4 feet wide for gurneys, to get in and out, in ambulance gurneys and so on and so forth. The ceilings all need to be so high, let's say. You need to have sprinkler systems. You need to have fire escapes. Well, maybe the Supreme Court says, requiring all abortion clinics to have to now go through and create 4 or 5 foot doorways and hallways, that's just too expensive. They were made with 3 feet, and that was plenty, and that's now an undue burden on an abortion clinic. That's unconstitutional. The typical response would be to the court, well, we'll leave in the part about the fire escapes and sprinkler systems.
Right. Everything else is good. Yeah.
But in Hellerstedt, they said the whole thing's gone. If you want to have fire escapes and sprinklers, you'll have to come back and pass another bill for that. Well, 4 of the judges disagreed with that, but 5 agreed. The whole thing's gone, the whole shooting match, and we're not even going to keep the part about fire escapes and sprinkler systems.
Probably because specifically, like you said, it dealt with abortion.
It dealt with abortion.
In any other case, the severability would have been just fine.
Sure, it had been just fine. But abortion is its own little peculiar thing. So this idea that we're going to pass 4 criminal statutes all at one time, and whichever one isn't constitutional is what's left standing at the end of the day, you're going to have to get the court to reverse its severability analysis that's just 4 years old this year. Mm-hmm. And you're going to have to hope that Kennedy, who was part of that weird special abortion severability analysis, that Kavanaugh would join the 4 that are still left on the court, and he would change his mind, and they would flip the precedent after 3 or 4 or 5 years. And maybe he would do that, but he may not. So, that has to be appreciated. If you're going to pass a tiered approach, you better be counting on.
There's already a Supreme Court precedent, only 4 years old,
that's right,
saying that this tiered approach is not acceptable to the court.
The concept that we're going to sort through your bill and figure out what's left standing at the end of the day, this is not a WWE grudge match, who's left in the cage at the end of the day.
Yeah.
We're not going to do your work for you.
No good, at least when it comes to abortion.
At least when it comes to abortion.
Yeah.
Now, if it'd been murder versus homicide versus, something else, the court might have said, okay, we'll do that. But courts are reluctant to do the legislative work. So again, you're going to have to provide your evidence.
That's a great point.
You're going to have your findings. Then you're going to have to make your argument that we're not asking you to do our job on the severability thing. And right now, you're going to lose unless you can convince Kavanaugh to flip the position Kennedy had and reverse this precedent from Hellerstedt of 2016.
Where's this Missouri bill right now? Where is it in the courts?
I think they've already filed a preliminary injunction again't it. I hate to say I don't know.
But it's not. But it's not been to the Supreme Court level. Obviously,
no. It just passed this year.
Oh, that's that. Okay,
yeah,
I didn't realize it was that recent.
Yeah. So those are just some of the things that you need to appreciate. This tiered approach that we'll get something because we'll either get heartbeat, we'll get 14 weeks, 16, 18 weeks, 20 weeks. Well, no, because you know what the abortionist will do. He will sue over the heartbeat part and say that's an undue burden to prohibit abortions prior to viability based on a heartbeat. Why that clearly violates Casey. It's unconstitutional, and the court will not sever that part of the bill from the 14, 18, and 20-week part. They may not even sever it from the sex selection and ethnic abortion and fetal abnormality abortions. They might, but you got to understand, Hellerstedt said severability clauses in abortion are treated a little bit differently. Now, they may take the abortion ban part, dealing with the heartbeat the 8 weeks, 14, 16, 18, 20 weeks, and separate that and say, okay, we'll sever that part out, and now we'll look over here at the fetal abnormality bill or the sex selection bill. But they may throw the whole thing out. I don't know. But I would say this, there aren't a whole lot of abortions that are probably being committed in Tennessee based on just sex selection.
Right.
Probably aren't a lot that are being done just for fetal abnormalities.
I actually saw a statistic yesterday. I think Live Action put it out there because there's this bill. I think it's going on next week in the Supreme Court. The what is it? The
pain capable.
Pain capable bill
in Congress.
In Congress. Federally, which essentially, if it passed, would federally ban abortions beyond 20 weeks. I believe it is, because that's when they've determined fetal pain happens.
Right.
But the interesting statistic there, because we like to pat ourselves on the back and look pro-life and say, oh, look at what we've done. I mean, we're 61 million babies in since 1973. So we're over 1 million babies a year in the U.S. essentially. Live Action put out a statistic saying that across the entire United States, there's just over 11,000 babies being aborted beyond 20 weeks. Okay, so you're going through, we're pro-life, we're doing, fetal pain in 20 weeks, and I'm not denying that that's a big deal when you're saving babies, but you're putting a law up that's saving 11,000 babies versus the million that we're aborting in this country every year. So I'm just putting that out there, the scale. Because it's put out there like we're doing this big monumental thing, like we're just changing the landscape. But already as it is, it's a very, very small percentage of abortions that are even taking place beyond 20 weeks, even where it's legal.
Yeah, and to those 11,000 babies, that's really
that's important. A big deal. That's a big Absolutely. Deal. But I'm not denying that.
But we do need to remember what we're trying to deal with here. We're keeping in the law a terrible principle. And that's what gets lost here. I said this at our state legislative issues briefing, which you can find on Facebook, right?
Yeah.
I said, look, if all we do is prohibit pain-capable abortions, babies that can feel pain, I mean, that's good, I guess. It is good that they're not going to be killed. So I don't take that out of context. But we're leaving in the law the principle that the determination of life and being and personality, what it means to be a person, is not the rightful authority and place of God Almighty, that we have no authority or right to change. It's saying, no, that's made by a new God called a majority of the United States Supreme Court. So as a Christian, I can sit here and argue about how clean the facility should be and how close a doctor should be to a hospital that he could have admitting privileges, because I'm not there talking about the life of the individual. I'm not there saying, you're not a person until the Supreme Court says you're a person. You're not a life until the Supreme Court says you're a life. I'm there talking about you're not clean enough, or you're clean enough when the Supreme Court says you're clean enough. But when you move the issue to when are you a human being that has being, that has personality, that has life, I cannot stand by and ascribe to the Supreme Court an authority that God says is mine and mine alone. And I will not give my glory as the self-existing source of all being to 5 puny judges whose breath of life is in their nostrils on the United States Supreme Court. That's what we're conceding.
Yeah.
Every time we say, well, let's just chip at this, we're saying that until we can win, we're not going to say to the Supreme Court, you arrogant, godless people.
You got it wrong, fix it.
Fix it. Now, people say, well, you got to be prudent, you got to be practical. No, as a Christian, I have to proclaim the truth, period, and let God deal with the consciences of men. That's my sole obligation.
Can your conscience,
Speak
according
the truth
to God, allow you to continue to vote on a law that says
delegates to the Supreme Court?
You can't kill this baby, but you can kill this one.
That's right. This baby you get to decide has life, but the determination of what is life and what is existence and what is a person does not rest in the hands of the United States Supreme Court.
Amen.
It rests in God's hands. For me to deny that is to deny God his rightful place as a Christian. End of the discussion for me.
Yeah.
We
Me
can
too.
become pragmatists if we want to, but there's the end of the discussion about that. Now, we can have discussions about how clean is a facility or how close you have to be to a hospital where you, because those are not making determinations that a life is in being. But in any way, what you were just pointing out here is that the Missouri bill actually has findings here. I was going off my microphone about the state of abortions at certain stages. So notice what they're saying here, even about the Missouri ban about 8 weeks. A large percentage of women who have abortions performed or induced upon them in Missouri each year are less than 8 weeks of gestational age. Oh, so we're not affecting a large percentage of women. They're still going to abort their babies. And then they have to prove 14 weeks because that's the next step along the process. A large majority are at less than 14 weeks. So see, we're not burdening abortion because most women, the large majority, have their abortions before then. See, we're not really burdening abortion that badly. There's my principle. A prohibition at 8 weeks doesn't amount to a substantial obstacle to the large fraction of women.
It's so their big abortion bill, their underlying principle is that we're not really affecting abortion to that great of a degree.
That's right.
That's their anti-abortion bill.
So there's our principle.
Oh my God.
But see, what they're doing is they're conceding
that Roe is good law.
That Roe is good law. And as long as we don't affect too many women too harshly, then our law's okay, isn't it? And see, so if they approve
David, I'm sorry, it's stupid.
Well,
we're just stupid.
I know.
That's where I'll own it. It's stupid.
Yeah, but that's what we have to understand. That's the principle that we're fighting for, is that as long as not too many women are having their abortions hindered, our law ought to be okay, right, Supreme Court? That's what we're dealing with. And I just think we need to understand that. We can support whatever we want to support, but we need to understand the underlying principle.
And this is so far as we know, I mean, we haven't seen the bill, but so far as we know, this has been the stated model.
That's right.
For what we're trying to draft here in Tennessee with the governor's bill.
That's right. And now I will say I've had conversations with his staff and some people, and I'm trying to raise these issues with them. So don't take this as dogging the governor. I'm trying to make sure our constituents understand, but I'm also communicating this directly to the governor's office. I sent this information about severability and stuff to the governor's office last week.
We just don't know
yet.
I
don't know what he'll do with it.
Yeah.
But I thought it would be helpful for our listeners to understand, one, how the process works, the importance of testimony and findings. Without that, you're probably leaving the court to infer whatever they want to infer, and they'll probably make every inference against you. And then, people need to understand, well, what does a laddered approach look like? The governor may take a completely different laddered approach.
And have a completely different basis.
I don't know.
We don't know.
But people need to start thinking about this, because the legislature is getting closer to wrapping up. They're going to be wrapping up.
And this is going to, it's going to happen fast.
So it's going to happen fast. And if you hadn't thought through some of this ahead of time, you're not going to know what to think about it at the right time. So I hope people find this helpful. We're happy to answer any questions, but that's how the sausage gets made.
So if you've listened to this episode, you know that this is not only a very complicated issue, but an extremely important issue, and it's a question that we're going to have to answer, like David said, very, very quickly here in Tennessee. And we're about to put our entire state on record as to what we believe life is here in our state. And I kind of think that's a big deal.
Yeah.
So if you have any questions or concerns or thoughts, this is certainly an episode to chime in on. You can send that to info@factn.org. It's info@factn.org. And thanks for joining.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your friends to subscribe too. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts. God, Law, and Liberty is a podcast of the Family Action Council of Tennessee. We are a 100% supporter-funded nonprofit advocating for family, life, marriage, and religious liberty. For more information, please visit us at www.facttennessee.org. That's FACTennessee.org. And please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Fact Tennessee.